Hi, folks. I'm Dennis Hopeless.
I'm Kyle Strahm.
This is Dennis and Kyle record WandaVision episode 3.
What did you think, Dennis? What did you think of WandaVision episode 3?
It is maybe my favorite episode, which if you watched our first then untitled episode of this show, you know that I really like the first two. But I think I've probably seen more Brady Bunch episodes than anything else. And so that got me. The fact that the house has been redesigned to look exactly like the Brady Bunch house is pretty amazing. But also, I think the show is finally starting to bake in more and more of the Lost-esque mystery where we're going. I kind of love the ending. So I'm a big fan. How about you?
So I, interestingly, wasn't as crazy about this episode, but I definitely think it's because I didn't watch Brady Bunch very much. And I think your enjoyment of this show, from what I understand, is how much you enjoy the homage. So for the first part of the episode, there were things that I thought were clever, and I thought the middle was very clever, but I didn't laugh as much as in the other two. And then of course I liked the weird mystery stuff at the end.
I think they're doing an incredible job of hitting the tone of exactly that era of sitcom for each one. Like the first ones felt so much like that late 50s, early 60s. Like this is what we're figuring out what a sitcom is, and it's this exact style of humor. And then they aged it up a little bit with episode 2, and this was such a 70s TV show. Like the thing with the stork and the her like hiding her belly with the fruit. It felt like 70s TV.
I really enjoyed her hiding the belly with the fruit on a meta level, because they did that so often when actresses were pregnant on those shows and they didn't write it in to the script. So there are entire seasons of like Lucy and Bewitched where they had all of this weird staging and holding of stuff to hide the actresses' bellies. So I thought it was clever that they worked that in as a plot point. The stork stuff I thought was fine. I did love it when the stork tried to eat that fish. I thought that was hilarious. And before that, they nailed just the doctor making a noise like and then the laugh track going. It's not funny at all, but that's exactly what they used to do on those shows.
So much of what's funny about it is that they play it exactly as it was played on those old shows, but the characters and audience are aware of things that they didn't acknowledge then, like the doctor saying that Geraldine would make a good nurse is such a sexist, ridiculous 70s doctor thing to say. Yeah. But the women kind of like wink at each other about that. And it's the same thing with the coats. It's very much a Clark Kent's glasses sort of a thing. Like obviously this woman is pregnant, the coat does not hide that. Right. But we're pretending that it does for the purposes of this silliness.
I liked the neighbor. I liked that weird stuff that was going on. Yeah. I liked that he was cutting into the wall in a very weird, menacing way that they just, whatever. I thought that was funny.
The stuff with the neighbors where they're clearly uncomfortable, but they're not, it's as though they're not sure why they're uncomfortable and they're not sure what's making them uncomfortable. So when that stuff starts to the seams start to rip and it starts to bleed through, that stuff's really interesting. Because was he cutting that because he's not a real person and doesn't have anything else to do and he's run out of that? Or is it because he was trying to, he was eavesdropping too heavily and didn't notice? There's a lot of different, what exactly is happening here that I love.
I interpreted it as he's always on that side of the wall and he was trying to break down to get in. But I only interpreted it that way because of the agent who was sent in to help.
Right.
And it's like Total Recall, right? So what was the character's name who was talking to her about getting fired?
Geraldine.
Right. So Geraldine was basically the little bald guy from Total Recall.
Right.
As a lifeline.
Right.
And is that the sword logo? Is that what that was?
Yeah, that appears to be the sword logo, which in Marvel Comics is basically the space version of S.H.I.E.L.D. And so I presume the military industrial complex MacGuffin of the show, instead of Shield, because of what happened in the movies, is now Sword.
Okay.
So yeah, it's interesting because you think that they're on to Vision and Wanda, and that's why they're acting weird. But then in that, like the little twist at the end is that they actually don't trust Geraldine because she doesn't have a house and she doesn't have a job and she just popped in out of nowhere, and like that's what they're discussing. She's like a glitch in the Matrix.
Okay, I didn't pick that up. I had just watched Psycho Gorman.
I will bathe in your blood.
Don't worry.
Be worried.
Which probably flavored my whole viewing of WandaVision episode 3.
They're very different things. Sure. I don't know. I just love how they do it. Like you're watching an episode of a Brady Bunch like television show, and it works pretty much from beginning to end exactly like that. And when the seams start to split, it works on a whole different level, but without pulling you all the way out. Like I expected them to yank you all the way out of what you're watching, and they've been really careful with that, like really methodical. Like, nope. Like this, other than the places where it is another thing also, this is just an episode of WandaVision Brady Bunch, which is great.
Maybe my favorite thing they did was when Vision became aware of how weird things were, and he sat down to talk to her about it, and then there was it looked like a mistake that it just went back, and for a split second I thought, oh, was there a mistake with the streaming? But I thought that was very well done. I love stuff like that. There's a whole Star Trek episode about that.
Presumably Wanda's controlling a large degree of this, right? So I think those glitches, we're supposed to believe that's her, like not wanting to accept it and rewriting reality in that direction. So she's getting quicker, right? Like it wasn't a full rewind. It was like, nope, we're just jumping right back.
Right.
I'm interested because there's 9 episodes, or there are 8 episodes total.
I don't know.
But we're running out of decades. The big 80s sitcoms are what? The Cosby Show and Growing Pains, Family Ties. Like those are the 80s family sitcoms, right? I presume we'll get like a Full House style thing for the 90s.
I want Married with Children, but I don't think they're going to go that way.
It makes a lot of sense for them to do Full House because her sisters were on that show, right?
Yeah, of course. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm interested. Do they do, Family Ties, Growing Pains, the Full House, Family Matters sort of thing? And then do we start getting more of the modern MCU WandaVision conversation, or does it keep going? Do we get whatever the hell happened in the early 2000s and then Big Bang Theory, 2.5 Men, I guess, and then Big Bang Theory and beyond? Or do we get reality TV? Because really what replaced the sitcom for most of 2000 on was reality TV, like cheap television that's relatable.
When did Iron Man come out?
2008.
Okay. So they won't go past that, I assume. The aspect ratio change, which I thought was really cool. I'm sure there are experts who would know exactly what aspect ratio that was and what decade it was. So that might be worth looking into.
We learned why there was differences in my media classes in college. And then television's eventually like, why the hell are we making this thing? Because we used to be, you'd rent a movie and it would be pan and scan. So somebody would like move the camera frame to make it fit on your television. So movies were variable, whereas TV was locked into this thing. And now you can do whatever you want on both formats because we have the super wide TVs. So yeah, that was a really smart way to represent that. But much like what we talked about before, would a 15-year-old have any idea why this screen shape keeps changing on this stuff? Is that a thing that people think about?
I'm curious, when you go onto Netflix or whatever, or Hulu, and I should know the answer to this, but I don't, and you watch an old show, is it always, it's often cropped the other way. So Star Trek The Next Generation, they zoom in and crop stuff off the top and bottom because it used to be a square and now it has to be a rectangle.
Right.
And I'd prefer the black bars on the sides, but I wonder if they do that with every show.
Before the pan and scan, they were trying to give you a TV expectation. So, well, because also television used to be smaller. So a tube TV that was, 1.5 feet tall, if you squeeze the movie down so you see the whole thing, you're now watching it on a cell phone size operation. But now that our TVs are huge, the only reason to crop off the top and bottom is to give you an expected shape.
Well, the actors do an amazing job acting as if they're in an old television show. It's really unbelievable how good they are.
It's still super bold. We've got 3 full episodes where you're mostly just watching these old TV shows. It's really playing with the television medium in a way that is amazing. I mean, you and I just had a whole conversation about Psycho Gorman before we started recording this, and this notion that you can be creative in new ways because you can really focus in on the fans of things. Because the reaction to this online has been interesting. Some people are like us and super love it, and some people are like, "Oh, I wanted like an MCU movie. Why am I watching these old TV shows with starring MCU characters?" But what that's doing, you're weeding out the people that this isn't for, and the people like us that love that stuff are getting something different from it. And you can laser focus like that now. Like you can really, there's so much content and there's so many streaming platforms and so much stuff. You can find the audience for something a little weirder, and it doesn't have to just be a rehash of the same show you've seen 100,000 times. That's pretty cool.
Which is great. I really hope the Star Wars shows do that too. I hope the genres of those is so far stretching like that. If there are 10 of them, they can all be the same.
Television gives you that option. You don't have to have a $100 million opening weekend. You can just find your audience that's really passionate about it. It's really changing world, and the fact that they're leaning into the art of it, and like, let's make different stuff for different people instead of just homogenous giant blockbuster summer movies for everybody.
And I saw the critics love WandaVision. It's great as far as MCU stuff goes. It's in like the top 3 or 4 of all of their. It was the top until the 3rd episode, and then it dropped down to amongst the top 4.
As far as stuff from the comics coming into play, Wanda's pregnant, and she's been pregnant for 12 hours, so they don't know much about it because they haven't really gotten a lot of information from the doctors. And they're arguing over whether to call the baby Billy or Tommy. And then when the baby's born, she's still pregnant with another baby, and it's twins. And Billy and Tommy are the name of the characters from Young Avengers in the comics. Again, I don't know the 80s storyline as well, so I'm not sure if the actual children were named Billy and Tommy, but that's pretty clearly where they're headed with that. Wiccan and Speed, I think is his name. That's probably where they're headed with the children.
Okay. I don't have much nerd lore to bring to this because I'm not really immersed in that stuff. But you did mention the neighbor is the Captain Marvel character, right?
Geraldine, who's the character that she's talking to in the middle of the episode. When I looked up her name online, it said it's been confirmed that she is actually Monica Rambeau, who is the little girl character from the Captain Marvel movie, and who was another Captain Marvel in the comics. Like she's a superhero character who was an Avenger and was Captain Marvel for a time in the comics. I think her codename is Photon or something now, but yeah, so that character playing Geraldine is actually an Avenger in the comics. So that'll be interesting to see what they do with that. And I saw somewhere a still of at the end, or at the beginning or end, where they show the tube TV that's showing like different images on it. There was a shot of Monica Rambeau dressed up like a cop, kind of on that. So I assume that's showing us Geraldine as a sword agent or whatever.
Ralph got another mention. The power went out, and his loving wife said, "He looks better in the dark."
So you still think Ralph's going to end up being like a super villain of some sort?
I think we'll see him, and he'll be more than just a slob.
My hope is that Ralph is MODOK.
Well, there's a MODOK show, isn't there?
I don't care. If we go to her house at some point and there's just a MODOK in the kitchen who's grumping about the mac and cheese or something like that, would delight me the most.
Well, that'd be nice. It would be nice.
So we want to hear what your thoughts on it were. What do you think's going to happen with Sword? Because I assume comic fans who've read all of the recent Marvel cosmic stuff know a lot about Sword. Like, where do you think they're headed with that? Is it actually going to be like intergalactic space force situation? We don't know what you guys thought. So hit us up in the comments with your thoughts on these things and others, and we'll be there for discussion. And like we told you before, our plan for this is to do a live stream whenever the season finale happens, so you guys can come on and interact with us in real time. So let's start those conversations in the comments as we build up to that.
Thanks, everybody.